Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Really excited to have Maria Wheatley back on the show. I believe this is probably the third time we've had her on in the last 4 or 5 years. She has been doing some wonderful work at Stonehenge. For those of you that do not know Maria, she is an accomplished author of books on sacred sites and dowsing. She has researched the esoteric design canons of prehistoric sites, Druidic ceremonial enclosures, and the Knights Templar for many years. Maria has studied Neolithic Britain and Bronze Age prehistory with the University of Bath, and alongside other professionals, Maria combines her knowledge of archaeology and earth energies with state-of-the-art equipment to locate and detect hidden frequencies that the earth emits. Believing in the earth force or dowsing is simply not enough for Maria. She wants to show the world that the prehistoric designers of ancient sites could locate and harness this earth energy. And with that, let me welcome Maria Wheatley to the show. Hello, Maria. How are you today? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, it's a pleasure, Bernard. Thanks for having me back.
Thank you. And after reading your introduction, I just wanted to touch on how fascinating it is. And perhaps we can start there a little bit about how so many of these megaliths, especially like Stonehenge and where you are around Amesbury, that they all seem to be, there seems to be some kind of energetic attraction. Is that fair to say that the ancients probably were attracted to the energy of these sites?
That's correct, Bernard. I mean, where I am in Wiltshire in the UK, it is like a megalithic capital. It contains Stonehenge, Avebury, which is the world's largest stone circle. It contains Stanton Drew, which is just about 30 miles away, which is the second largest stone circle in the world. It's literally a high energy place. And some people say it's attracting UFOs, crop circles. It's a paranormal hotspot where the ordinary is the extraordinary.
I like that. I love that. And as far, well, first of all, you said the world's largest stone circle. How big is the world's largest stone circle?
Well, it's in a site that contains about 28 acres, and it's 100 and possibly more. I mean, again, it has been fully excavated. So it's over 1,000 sort of feet wide. It is very large,
Wow.
The greatest stone circle at Avebury. Stonehenge is a lot smaller and more contained than Avebury, and it is a different design, and both have different energetic qualities and signatures.
And what would be the difference of the energy qualities between the two that we're talking about here, Stonehenge and the large stone circle at Amesbury?
Avebury is so large, it could literally fit in thousands of people from all over the probably known world, whereas Stonehenge is so confined, it's almost like for the selected few, the elite. You can't fit that many people inside of Stonehenge, and if you stand just outside of the megalith, literally by just a couple of feet, you can't hear what's going on at the center.
Oh, very interesting. I never knew that.
Mm.
Huh.
Yeah, so it really is a kind of more of a, this is something going on that we may not want you to know about at Stonehenge. And Avebury and Stanton Drew and other stone circles are the opposite. They are for the people.
Wow. Wow, very, very interesting. And with that being said, the well, I guess the ceremonies inside of Stonehenge being a little bit more secretive. Can you share with us a little bit about what we think we know about Stonehenge? What's the history that we've come to grasp, I guess, with empirical science and archaeology?
Well, it's literally the same as all over the world, whether it's the pyramids of Egypt or places like Stonehenge. According to the archaeological school of thought, it's all about death. It's all about death rites, and it's about the ancestors. They don't look at it that it's a living temple in itself. So, in a nutshell, yep, that's what the archaeologists say. It's a temple for the ancestors, based on the ancestors. There's no mystery. That is it.
Mm. And as far as the people that they say have are a part of this history, I hear so much talk about the Druids. That's not correct as far as age-wise? Is that right?
That's right. I mean, if we look to phase one and phase two, for example, of Stonehenge, phase one was what's called the Neolithic era. That's about 5,000 years ago. And the Bronze Age, which created the Stonehenge that we recognize today, its archetypal image is around about 2,500 BC. But the Druids came from Czechoslovakia in Europe, in a place called Bohemia. Bohemia means land of the Celts. So when
Mm.
you say Bohemian, you're saying Celtic person, basically. And that's where it's Latain in Czechoslovakia. And that was about 750 BC. So even though they were separate cultures, they were, related to one another. So I think there was a crossover, and the Bronze Age were the Druids, and the Druids were the Bronze Age. I don't think there's this big line, and all of a sudden these people came about. The culture certainly came from the Czech Republic, but it was already predominantly ceremonially here in the landscape.
Oh, okay. And so, Maria, when you're saying phase one and phase one, you said is the Neolithic age, and phase two would be the Bronze Age. Can you share with us, maybe in your own way, if you would like, whether we do phase one or phase two first? Give us perhaps a landscape. Let us share with us a bit about the people, what it was like to be there.
Yeah, I mean, for a start, in England, in the Neolithic, that's 5,000 years ago, before our present date, it was a warmer climate here. We know that for a fact because we used to supply Greece with two harvests. So let's imagine England, not with the rain, but for our Neolithic ancestors, they were living in a very warm climate, a very lush climate. So around about 5,000 years ago, they created, this is orthodox dating system. I actually think Stonehenge is much older, but if we use the archaeological timeline, the Neolithic of 5,000 years ago, the people created a massive earthen bank. It's called a henge with a ditch on the outside, and then another very large henge. So you've got like a henge, a ditch, and a henge. Very, very unusual. No other henges in England were necessarily like that. And that was made of chalk block. And when I mean chalk block, I mean, if you imagine like the bricks of your classical type of house, that's what it would have looked like. It was built of
Hmm.
chalk block, brilliant white, inside of which there was a massive circle of 56 very dark midnight blue, highly polished blue stones from Wales. And that would have appeared like the yin yang colouring of Eastern philosophy, black and
Mm.
white. It would have been very visual. That's phase one. Phase two, which came around about 2500 BC, is the Stonehenge that we recognise today. The massive lintels and the big trilithons inside of it. So they were two different monuments, if you see what I mean. Phase one and phase
Yes.
two.
And do we have we discovered that, I mean, were these phase one stones eroded or moved, or did they add on to it? How did this come
That's a
about?
really good question, Bernard, because for some reason at the end of the Neolithic, there was a big changeover, which we'll be discussing later on. A really change of culture, ideas, people in the landscape. And basically, they uprooted all of those stones and then they must have put them somewhere. This is another mystery. Where do you store 56
Right?
massive blue stones is a mystery in itself. And then they built the stone circle we recognize. So yeah, you're right. They just decided for some reason they wanted to close down that monument and build another within the same henge, within the same chalk block circular arena. They kept that, but everything else changed. And it's quite fascinating because we often think of the heel stone, that's the iconic large stone at Stonehenge, which aligns to the summer solstice sunrise. But I mean, we're spoon fed a lot of the times. And there's a classic astronomer called Dr. John Steele. And what he claims is if you look to the avenue and the Heelstone, then there could be another alignment. And that was to a comet, which was coming into the skies around about 2500 BC and would have created celestial fireworks. So we need to think about, maybe even different types of celestial alignments at Stonehenge.
Oh gosh, yeah. I would think logically that even just the way the stars would change in the last 2,000 years, we would have to kind of open up our minds to other examples of that. I can't help. I'm very curious now. Where did we, or where have you learned of the information about the blue stones? Was there some kind of wall painting, or how did we come up with that information?
Yeah, in 1666, there was an antiquarian called John Aubrey. When you have a really hot summer, yeah, and the ground becomes what we call parched, bits of yellow everywhere, anything that is an archaeological imprint of what went before, be that a building, be that a placement of a stone, it starts to show up in the ground as a patch that's different to the surrounding grass. And that's what John Aubrey noticed, and he called them the Aubrey holes. Then there was a recent excavations done by what's called the Riverside Project under the archaeologist Michael Parker Pearson, and he found that they contained the blue stones because you had what's called crushed chalk at the bottom, and you can start to estimate how heavy the stones were, and they found blue stone chipping. So yeah, it's been a kind of recent discovery, really.
Oh, wonderful. And so, Maria, tell us a little bit, moving forward a little bit, what were the cultures like there? We're so used to hearing about, whether they were savages, whether they were pagan, whether they were Druid, whether they were patriarchal, whether they were egalitarian. Do we have any evidence of perhaps what the Neolithic tribes or whatnot of that area were like? And what was the difference between them and perhaps the Bronze Age people that were there?
Well, for a start, I really do feel that the evidence points in the Neolithic to, generally speaking, maybe not the Stonehenge environs, but generally speaking across the British Isles, to be quite a gentle community with little warfare. For example, they were, getting on with one another. Women had a good role. Always have in British societies, even down to the Iron Age, with the fascinating and strong and courageous Queen Boudica, for example, and the same was at Stonehenge. So it seemed to be a kind of a society based on peace, with women holding significant roles. Is for sure. When it came to the Bronze Age and the changeover of all of these monuments, and something really happened in the landscape that kind of shook it to its core around about 2500 BC, then the males started to dominate, and there was more warfare in the landscape. Land was started to being divided up, for example. People were becoming greedy and wanting to be landowners. So a whole cultural way of life changed from sharing, community-based, to I have, this is mine, and if you trespass on my land, that is not permitted. So the whole culture changed overnight, literally.
Wow. And I guess is it too far, or is it too long ago to say that was the whole era of when, let's say, like the lords of the land came about?
It was the start. It was the start of land ownership,
Ah,
lavish grave goods, gold, trading, money, and that type of culture, which, let's face it, we kind of recognize today and could relate to. Whereas in earlier times, it was much, much different. There was hardly any dividing of the land. And you can tell this by easy archaeological studies. It's not rocket science. The people were more friendly in those eras as well.
Yeah, less fear-based and less war-based, perhaps.
Well, excellently put. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Um, with that being said, have you? And I know this might be more of an anthropological versus archaeological, but perhaps what was their spirituality like? Was there any religion? Were they basically indigenous people that worship the stars and
Yeah, that's you've raised some really good points, and it certainly seems that these people did have a strong spiritual way of life. Certainly, they were expert astronomers, and certainly, although they didn't write anything down, because even in the later Druidic period, in ancient England, we were a bardic people. We were, the spoken word. So it was always about a sacred language, a sacred way of teaching. And so even though we didn't write anything down, in the teachings of the Druids, which inherited a lot from the Bronze Age people, we have the known diameter of the Earth, for example, which is encoded into Stonehenge anyway. They were an advanced civilized culture that was rich in the way that they looked at the land. They saw the land as a living a being, like Gaia. They saw the trees and the rivers as having a life force that one could communicate with and become one with at any moment in time, just through respect and observation.
oh, wonderful. It's a shame that we have lost that. Well, we seem to be going back to that, many of us, but it's good to know that these people were so connected and attuned, and that, to me, that kind of amplifies the beauty of their placement of these places. Like we said earlier, the energetic qualities were probably tapped into by these people.
Oh, exactly. They knew exactly the harmonics beneath the earth. They knew what kind of energies were beneath the earth. They marked them out globally and monumentalized the landscape. And one little fact that I think a lot of people don't appreciate about how it was in antiquity is that because there was no air pollution, no light, pilots have a saying that when it's a really clear day, they call it a gin clear day in the UK. Like the cleared gin that you could drink,
Right.
because it amplifies. Once you have clear air, yeah, really clear gin clear pilot air, it amplifies the horizon line. Yeah, so your perception of where you are in the landscape can differ. We've lost that because we have a lot of pollution in the air.
Yeah. And light pollution, especially.
Oh yeah, well, exactly. Yeah.
So now you mentioned some about harmonics, and I believe you were. I know you're doing research now on the skulls, but recently I believe you were looking into the harmonics of the sounds of Stonehenge, or
That's right. I'm working with that, still in the research phase. I'm working with a professor, and he's very keen on decoding kind of the music of the spheres and the mathematics of ancient sites. And also, he's turned some of the dowsing patterns that I've been working with, which are like spiral patterns, ley lines, and things like that, into their musical equivalent. So we've turned the kind of the earth energies into music, and that's what we're researching at the moment to talk about in the future. So we're going to be seeing pretty soon totally different dimensions, the dynamics of ancient sites that have gone by unnoticed, really. And I do feel that our ancient ancestors saw everything slightly differently to what we do today.
absolutely. I mean, you had mentioned earlier at the beginning of the show how you couldn't hear people talking inside Stonehenge, so they must have had some type of knowledge of acoustics or frequencies.
They had our depth knowledge, Bernard. You're right. I mean, there was an experiment done by Reading University using pink noise as a background to record frequencies on at Stonehenge. And you have the gaps that are clear at Stonehenge, you know, with the lintels on the top going around. There's 30 standing stones with 30 lintels on. And they expected the sound of they were recording on to go out through the gaps, you know, creating like all these rays, 30 rays going out. But it didn't. The sound stayed inside the stone circle and went round the gaps. It didn't go through the gaps.
Oh, wow.
So that really surprised them, because they thought, you know, this is a form of technology that you know we didn't suspect. We thought, oh, it's just going to go clear through the gaps.
Absolutely, and I mean, even in quantum physics, they talk about, you know, the splits of waves, and even within this, I guess there is no splitting of the waves.
No, and again, if we kind of look at the different layers at ancient sites, I mean, not just Stonehenge, it is literally layer after layer after layer after layer, like a big onion. And to get to its core, to get to right to its center, you take off many different multifaceted layers. So our ancient ancestors applied layer after layer to create a multi-dimensional, faceted monument that we are still trying to decode today.
Very interesting. And is there any evidence that they incorporated this knowledge into their, maybe perhaps their burial practices? I mean, I understand, like, perhaps in Ireland, we see that, and New Grange, where that's there's sound involved in some of the passage graves there. But as far as the Stonehenge area, as we're going to go into talking about the skulls you found, what about their burial practices of that region? Is some of this technology used that you've found?
Well, yeah, I mean, the monuments in the burial mounds in Stonehenge are vastly different from anywhere else in the country. So they're different. They're in a class of their own. So they're not like Newgrange at all, or the West Kennet Long Barrow near Avebury. If we imagine, for the listeners that have never seen a long barrow on Salisbury Plain, which incidentally is the equivalent to your Area 51. I always liken Salisbury Plain to that, because it's owned by the military. And it's very interesting to note, Bernard, that the latest nuclear centre on Salisbury Plain is in perfect alignment to Stonehenge and can be seen from Stonehenge. Cannot be coincidental. But if we look at the long mounds, if you imagine like a classical roof shape, you know, like you used to draw a house as a kid with a roof.
Yeah, yeah.
If you use that shape, that's the shape of the long barrows on Salisbury Plain, and they are gigantic. Some of them are exceptionally long, and they were made of different layers of material, of organic and inorganic, a bit like an orgone, you know, generator, if you will, of chalk block and various different types of material. But they were built in such a way as not to be easily destroyed. And what do I mean by that? In Area 51, if I can call it that, tanks, army tanks, used to ride over all of the barrows as part of their maneuvers. Shockingly so. Recently, they have been saved. But what the army noticed about some of these long mounds constructed by our ancestors is, despite the tonnage of tanks riding over their backs, they didn't sag at all to the weight. So that goes to show the engineering skills that created these massive long mounds, which I think is just putting the burial remains in them is the last phase. There is an unknown phase about these long mounds.
So these, I mean, they obviously have the technology to withstand lots of weight. They obviously use the perhaps maybe the building of it itself was ceremonial to the people as well.
Well, yeah, I agree. I think it was. I think that the whole of the way the Salisbury Plain has been laid out in monuments. And bear in mind, when I say the Salisbury Plain, this is an area that contains Stonehenge, owned and managed by the military. It's about 25 miles by 30 miles, which contains the largest amount of ancient sites ever created in Britain. It's over 2,000 sites alone are found on the Salisbury Plain. That's
Wow,
incredible.
that is. Well, we're going to take a short commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to continue.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I want to thank you all for listening today. We are speaking with Maria Wheatley, who is here to discuss the mystery of the elongated skulls at Stonehenge. Before we get into that part of the discussion, Maria, we have a question from the chat room, and I'm not sure if either of us are the ones to answer, but it's a very interesting question, very metaphysical. Maybe you know someone who knows the answer. But the question is, has anybody looked into the old canopy theory with the firmament and the ionized 5D atmosphere where energy is conducive and we can relate to everything living entity and the elemental beings are fully manifested everywhere again?
Wow, that's
I think that's a show within itself. It's a great question. Thank you for asking. There's about 4 different parts in that. Do you know anybody that's been looking into that theory, the firmament and the ionized 5D atmosphere?
no, I don't, but I certainly feel they should be.
Yes. Well, I agree. I agree. Definitely.
And I'm sorry, I can't answer that, but I kind of, in my sense of feeling, I feel that there's some really good direction with that question. So I thank the listener for putting that out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's definitely a topic to look into. Maybe I'll do a show on that alone. Maybe I'll find somebody who's been studying that. So thank you. Now, before we went on the break, though, and I never really knew this, so I just want to bring it up again, that I guess it's the British military owns all of that area.
Yes, it's called the Salisbury Plain. The Salisbury Plain has numerous army headquarters on it. Stonehenge itself is surrounded by no less than 10 military establishments encircling it.
Wow.
Hmm.
That's very, it makes things that make you go, exactly. I can't help but wonder, are they trying to keep something in or trying to keep something out or
Exactly. I mean, you always raise good points, Bernard. And just recently, I think it was in June actually, I took a small group of 10 to 12 people to a particular long barrow on the Salisbury Plain, which is in alignment to some army barracks. It was never used for burial. No burial bones or the deposits were ever found in it. It is a generator of energy. The energy line links straight to the army barracks. We went up there to do a meditation energy work. By the time I'd taken the group to the bottom, the military police were waiting for me, asking me what I was doing, even though that's public, that was right on the edge of the plain. That you are being watched. And they told me from the moment I went to that mound, I was being watched on camera close up.
very, very strange. Well, maybe
It
we
is
should.
strange.
Yes, we need somebody else to come in and look. Maybe we can get a whistleblower from the British military to share what's going on there. Maria, let's talk a little bit about the new book that you're going to be releasing. Did you release it already? I know I've seen it on
Yeah.
Facebook. Oh, it has been released. Very good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a kind of introduction to my work that I've been researching. That's going to be put together in a big book to try and raise some funds to help me buy some equipment. So I released this information first because the big book that I'm going to be doing is called From Stonehenge to Serpent Mound, because I've discovered certain likenesses between the cultural divides of America and England in monumental building programs and certain techniques.
Oh.
So this is kind of leading up to that, if you will. So so it's out there. It's on my website, the aveburyexperience.co.uk. if anybody would like to support my work and find out about the elongated skulls of Stonehenge. The story is fascinating, heart-rendering.
Wow. Wow. I'm so grateful that you're looking over to North America. It seems that so many researchers are either in Egypt and England or in South and Central America, but nobody looks at what's happening here in North America. And there seems to be more and more discoveries being made. I believe they just found a carving of a pterodactyl in the Stonehenge of Lake Michigan, at the floor of Lake Michigan.
Well, that's in itself is truly remarkable. I mean, I do agree. I think that, the Celtic culture, which I think, spreaded west,
Yeah.
it really did go west, so to speak, has been overlooked by, a lot of researchers. And actually, for when I was from the age of 12 to about 15, I actually grew up in Pennsylvania near Valley Forge, even though I live over
Oh.
here now.
Uh-huh.
So my late father took me to Newark, Cahokia, Woodhenge, Serpent Mound. So I've always had an affinity with ancient sites. So I've always looked for, true ways where the cultural became one, because I think we now have the evidence that it was, and it's going to be quite striking when the American public and the British public see these likenesses.
Yes, I believe so. I believe so. So Maria, what is it that you have found over there? We say elongated skulls. Were they found in a mass grave? Were they found in a royal grave? What are we looking at here as far as this new discovery?
Well, what we're looking at is, for a start, there was the largest long mound in northwest Europe ever built was on the Salisbury Plain. It is gigantic. It's over 390 feet long. It is absolutely huge. Now, when antiquarians first dug into that, they were expecting to find, like other long mounds in their second phase, their last phase, were used to house lots of skulls. They were communal burial places. So this massive mound, they expected to find hundreds and hundreds of skulls.
Hmm.
And they found one. And then when they looked at the skull a bit closer, they realized that they weren't looking at a skull similar to their own. And it was much longer, elongated, not like the cone heads of Fracas, for example, but elongated more to the equivalent of Malta, and Egypt, and
Mm.
that type of skull. And it shocked the Victorian antiquarians because it was of a woman. And they thought, what's this woman doing in this grave with this odd shaped skull? And then they found out she had been murdered. So it became like a cold case, a murder. Who killed her? Why? And that's what I looked into when I discovered that it was a woman in this grave, and she had an elongated skull. And incidentally, trying to track down that skull, Bernard, I had doors slammed in my face. I had an email circus going round and round and round. Oh, it was, it's like walking through treacle trying to get some artifacts out of our British Museum, which is shocking. This is our spiritual heritage. This
Yeah.
belongs to us, not to them.
Right. So were you
Yes,
able to actually see the skull personally?
yes.
Oh.
They didn't want to let me in because they classed me as a non-academic. But I'm affiliated. I have an esoteric school, which is affiliated to a very large, respectable association of British correspondence colleges. So basically, they had to let me in because I'm with them. So I went in, and do you know what? When the skull came out, it was one of those moments where she and I were kind of literally looking at one another, and I felt her pain from being moved from the plane. Then I looked around this warehouse in the middle of England, and it was massive, Bernard. It must have been about sort of 30 feet high, and all I could see, for as long as I could see down the corridor, were ancient Egyptian finds, St. Abydos, with male or female written on it. It was huge hordes of artifacts in boxes, which I found quite sad. So I
Oh.
came face to face with her and apologized that she'd been taken from the plane. back way back when.
Right.
And she was a lot of the elongated skulls were recorded and sketched, and their dimensions taken many years ago, in the last century or so. But a lot of them have mysteriously gone missing.
Oh, wow.
So it's very hard to, apart from what I call the Neolithic High Queen, because she must have been of high status, this woman, to be buried in a long mound, the largest in Northwest Europe,
Yes.
just her by herself. But the rest of what I feel was, her group of people, um, their remains are very, very odd. It's hard to track them down. It really is. There's sketches and dimensions left.
I can't help but wonder if they've like been sold to the black market or are they just being suppressed, you know? Could be a combination.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think it probably is a combination, and it's just one of those difficult circuses that you go on. But these people were probably the ruling elite of Stonehenge at the time. And recent evaluation by archaeologists in about sort of 10 years ago, in the last 10 years, started to look at the different skull types in the UK, because we have round faces like what we've got. We've got your classical European kind of round skull, and that they realized that the round skull people and the kind of elongated skull people were actually contemporary, living side by side at one point in ancient Britain.
Huh. Now, Maria, what can we, I guess, deduce from all these elongated skulls coming from this area? Were they ceremonially bound? Were they all royalty? What have you? You have a hypothesis you're working on with this, or?
Well, we do feel that this is predominantly, even though there was a few other elongated skulls found at different parts in the UK, this was like their capital central the Stonehenge environs. This is where they wanted to be, and they created all of the monuments in ancient Neolithic Britain. Whether you call them the Nephilim, whether you call them the elongated ones, whatever you call them, these people were creating elongated monuments in the ceremonial landscape. All of the monuments around their era were long and elongated like their skulls.
Oh.
And then, round about the Bronze Age, when the culture changed, and this is because these people were, they murdered, basically, round barrows came into fashion. The long barrows were decommissioned. We can talk about how they were decommissioned in a moment. And all of the round skulled people were placed into round barrows. You've only got to glance around at the landscape in the Stonehenge environs to determine what type of skulled people were in particular types of monuments.
My goodness, and were so these skulls were found in the area adjacent to the main Stonehenge monument?
They were found within the Salisbury Plain,
Okay.
which is not that far from Stonehenge on the plain itself. Which is, again, it's very difficult. I mean, it's a no-go area. If what's called a red flag flies on Salisbury Plain, Bernard, that means the army's practicing with live ammo, and you can't go on. It's a no-go military zone. And incidentally, all of the barrows that have the elongated skulls or had the elongated skulls in are in that no-go military zone.
Huh. So they don't even want, not only do they not want us to A, feel the energy, B, do any research, they really don't want us to know that these people with the elongated skulls were buried there. I mean, it's a theory to contemplate that they don't want us to know.
They don't want us to know at all, because the biggest barrow that had the massive hoard of elongated ones in it can never be accessed by anyone unless you're a military commanding officer. Cannot be coincidental.
Oh my goodness. So not even the highly Sawasis of the world can
You could get his butt over there and he might get blown up. But apart from that, no.
I bet I bet like mainstream archaeologists.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Well, the mainstream archaeologists, you see, they care for the monuments, a couple of times of the year, and that is it. There's no research, there's no archaeology done because these aren't safe havens. They seriously aren't. And to go around the Salisbury Plain is quite an experience because you spend time within the permissible areas of Stonehenge at night, and just like Area 51, you start to see strange lights coming out of the ground.
Yeah.
You start to see, strange things occurring in front of your own eyes.
I'm sure. I'm sure. And now, I want to ask you because we're going to be running out of time here. We got about 5 more minutes left. In reference to the people with the long skulls being buried up to a certain point, then we have the round burrows. What do we have any evidence of what happened there? Did they all get killed? Did they all ascend back, up, or what do we think happened there?
What I suggest is, one interpretation is in 2500 BC, there was a change of leadership, there was a change of culture, there was a change of spirituality, because all of the long barrows, and some of them had megalithic chambers in that could have been used for initiation chambers. You mentioned acoustics. Newgrange could have been used on the acoustic level to raise one's consciousness, for oracle rites, for lots of different reasons. All of them across Northwest Europe were closed down at the same time. And by closed down, what I mean is they were infilled with earth. They were shut off forever.
Oh.
And then just before they were all shut off forever, they placed the skulls in them, and they were the elongated skulls. So a culture was hidden away. Literally, you can't see us, you never existed. We're pushing you in these mounds. Then we're putting massive 12-ton blocking stones in front of the entrance, so nobody will ever realize you ever laid there. That's what was done in 2500 BC in the UK.
Well, it's almost like erasing the history of an entire culture.
Exactly. That's it, Bernard. That's it in a nutshell.
So we have to ask ourselves, what was it that motivated these people to want to hide them?
Yes, I mean that is the crux of the matter, and it must have been a real kind of cultural difference, because not only were they decommissioned, all of their monuments were decommissioned. They were smashed to pieces in some respects. They were literally hacked apart. Not only that, what was happening as well around that time is that the elongated ones were murdered, all of them. In the Salisbury Plain, every single elongated skull was smashed on the right-hand side of its skull by an assailant, and one of them was even beheaded.
Oh my goodness! So we're almost looking not only at a cultural genocide, but a physical genocide of a people.
Absolutely, and the sad fact is in the mass grave on the Area 51 of the elongated ones, there were children with them, and they were shown no mercy. Whoever decided to commit genocide on these people didn't even want the children to survive. They were all met their peril, and their peril was they had defensive wounds. So, you must have put some of your hand against your face to stop it. You knew it was coming. You could see who was about to destroy you. It's their lost legacy. And I'm so glad that, I can be a voice for these ancestral people, because their story simply has never been told. And I think it has been repressed.
Yes, you can say that again. I have about 8,000 thoughts going through my mind right now. Everything from the Nephilim to aliens to angels or just royal magical people, for all we know. I mean, there's just so much to comprehend and to understand from this.
It is. I mean, they could be Nephilim, they could be alien. I mean, the thing about the surviving skulls is if they've been handled too much over too long a period, they become what's called contaminated. Their DNA is often contaminated. And when I was discussing this with one of a person I know from a university that was basically helping me in a way, said, oh, they've become so contaminated you can't take a DNA sample of them anymore. So again, I find that quite extraordinary when some of the other samples have remained non-contaminated.
Unbelievable.
Why is that?
Yeah. Is it done on purpose or just ignorance?
I think it's probably a combination of both. I really do feel, Bernard, for this story in the UK never to have been aired at all, just muted silently between one or two archaeologists 10 years ago, and then silenced from that period until someone like myself researches Stonehenge environs and falls onto this information. I find it that extraordinary. This has been hidden from the British people for nearly 5,000 years. Not only were these people, whoever they were and whatever they were banished to the long mounds of which they built, which was an irony in itself. Even the archaeologists have hustled papers here and there, skulls here and there, almost so that it makes it, nigh on impossible unless you're very stubborn, which I am.
Good. We need people like you. Thank you. I can't help but feel like there's this whole new generation of archaeological whistleblowers that are trying to share the truth of of human history.
Yeah, I agree with that, and I think they are. I mean, I did study archaeology with Wessex Archaeology, what's called landscape archaeology, of the history, Neolithic, Bronze Age, and Druidic periods. Officially the
Right.
University of Bath, which was in Swindon. So I do have archaeological friends,
Yes.
and they're getting pretty fed up. And I remember saying to Hugh Newman of Megalithomania
Yeah.
in 2013 that it will be found out that Stonehenge and places were Mesolithic monuments. Bernard, we're coming close to whistleblowers coming out with the fact that there's stones at Stonehenge dating back to 10,000 BC.
That's amazing. That is absolutely amazing, and a great point to end on. We are out of time, unbelievably. I really enjoy speaking with you, Maria. Thank you very, very much. Can you share with everybody again the title of your book and where they can find it?
Sure, it's called The Elongated Skulls of Stonehenge, and you can get a copy on www.theavebury, that's Avebury, experience.co.uk, theaveburyexperience.co.uk.
Wonderful. And they can come out there and go on tour with you once in a while, right?
Yeah, I'm going to take people to these long mounds, hopefully with some permission next year, to see aspects of the landscape you don't normally get to see.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody. We will see you next week. We love you all very